There came a point where belief wasn't enough for me anymore. Not because the experience wasn't real, but because it was. And when something starts to reorganize your life, you have a responsibility to stay honest about it. But up until this point, everything had been internal, felt, experienced, repeated, but still very subjective. And I know myself well enough to know this one thing. I didn't want to believe in this. I wanted to understand it. Because belief can lie to you. Belief fills in gaps. Belief skips steps. Belief protects the story that you want to tell. But measurement doesn't do that at all. Measurement just shows you what's there. And that distinction mattered to me, especially because of how this started. This didn't come from certainty. It came from collapse. So I listened. And the last thing I wanted to do was replace one illusion with another. I needed friction, something neutral, something that didn't care how I felt about it. And that's when the question changed. It stopped being, is this meaningful? And became, what actually is happening in my body when the state shows up? That's a very different question. And honestly, kind of scared me a little bit too. Because measurement doesn't guarantee validation. It can just as easily tell you, guess what? You're wrong. And I had to be okay with that. So I went looking, not for confirmation, but for tools that could observe what I was feeling without the interpretation of a story. Heart rate variability, coherence, physiological regulation. Not because I wanted to medicalize the experience, but because I wanted to ground it, to keep myself honest. And the first time I saw the data shift alongside the state, I didn't feel completely excited about it. I mean, I did feel excited, but it didn't overcome me. But I did feel sober, because excitement would have pulled me back into belief, so I kept that at bay. But what I did feel instead was something quieter. Alignment. Not because it proved anything, but because it corresponded. And the internal state of the external measurement moved together. Not perfectly and not every time, but they did move enough to matter, to listen to it. And that changed my relationship with the experience. Because now I wasn't relying on memory or interpretation or emotion. I had a reference point. It was something that didn't care about my story at all. And that was really grounding for me. Guess what? It slowed me down, made me more careful, made me more precise. Because once you introduce measurement, a measurement tool or a device, you don't get to exaggerate at all. You don't get to dramatize. You have to accept variability, noise, limits, and that's where integrity lives. This wasn't about proving anything to anybody else at all. It was about protecting myself from self-deception, about making sure I wasn't projecting meaning where there wasn't any. And the surprising thing was, the more measured I became, the less attached I was to the outcome. I wasn't chasing coherence. I was just observing the conditions. I wasn't trying to win an argument. I was trying to understand a process. And that's when this stopped feeling personal. It stopped being my experience and started becoming a repeatable physiological state under specific internal conditions. And that shift matters because it's the difference between belief and inquiry, between identity and investigation, between needing to be right and just being willing to learn. I want to say something clearly here. Measurement didn't make this experience more meaningful. It just made it more responsible. It forced humility and it forced patience. It forced me to admit what I didn't quite know yet. And that's when I realized something really important. This couldn't just stay as a private journey, not because it was special, but because it was structured, repeatable, observable, and grounded enough to be worked with. And that's when the responsibility shifted. It went from, this is happening to me, to, what's the most careful way that I can hold this? And that question is what led everything that followed.